Thank you, Andreas. I'm gonna hang up. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry about the problem.
No. Thank you. I think we're ready to initiate the second part of the dialogue. Now I would like to invite Ramiro Batzin, co-chair of the IFB, to lead us in the list and this last part of the dialogue. Hermano Batzin.
Sí, estamos, gracias.
Yes, so should we start? Good morning, everyone. So we will now open the sixth item of the agenda. Thank you for the participation of the chair of the subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice, the chair of the subsidiary body on implementation, and the co-chairs of the working group of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Welcome you all. Indigenous people and local communities of International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity have organized approximately 18 regional and sub-regional dialogues in the 7 indigenous socio-cultural regions. Apart from another dialogue organized by Indigenous Women's Biodiversity Network, especially for women members of Indigenous peoples and local communities. The results of these dialogues have been shared during this virtual dialogue. I would like to invite Viviana Figueroa to share the results of these 3 days of work, the ones that we have been discussing among all the different indigenous delegates. I will now give the floor to Viviana. Good morning, brothers and sisters. I have the pleasure to talk to the co-presidents and the SAFSTA, the chair of the subsidiary body on implementation, the chair of SAFSTA, and the co-chairs of the working group on the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We are really already shared the document with all of you, but we are going to be really focusing on a specific points. We have been working pretty hard on this long process, along the whole year of discussions. This is a continuation, and we may probably have the opportunity to keep on discussing on different topics. First of all, I would like to talk on our general ideas on the process as such. You may probably notice that we have had lots of limitations on the participation of indigenous people. And on the one hand, we have technology issues. You know that we are working pretty hard, and many brothers and sisters around the globe are pretty much concerned. They do have lots of inputs and ideas, and they weren't really able to join this platform. Indigenous people have lots of limitations since our regions do not have internet access, or maybe internet quality is not good enough so that you can connect throughout these different platforms. And the platform are not user friendly, which is also limiting our participation, which is quite challenging within the pandemic. Therefore, we would like to tell that if these virtual events will continue for a long time, this could be going against the human rights in our participation in issues that are of our concern. Everything related to biodiversity, as you know, uh, are of our concern since we are living in these biodiversity areas and we would like to contribute in a more efficient and constructive way as partners and collaborators within this whole process. We are the first ones to be concerned of changing the negative effect on biodiversity in the world. The different inputs and contributions of the IPLCs on the draft were not considered yet. Zero draft is not really considering our points of view, which we believe it's a huge loss. We hope we can have an open dialogue and we can discuss and include our perspectives. Why? Because we have lots of things to say. We're going to be sharing with you some of our analysis on the specific targets, but we think that in this specific year, in a period we are beginning from up to 2050, there's lots of things to be done regarding biodiversity. Another issue on the process is that if we are not really able to guarantee our full and effective participation, this whole process will lose legitimacy, and that will be a shame because you know that this process and the global framework document be a solid one in the sense that we could really implement it in order to protect our biodiversity and us as IPLCs could contribute with our knowledge and our sustainable customary use. Therefore, we make a call to the parties and institutions and international organizations to contribute to the voluntary fund in order to allow or support our full and effective participation of IPLCs and to include us in the COP 15, and other different negotiation processes and other related workshops or experts groups that you're going to be organizing in the months to come or in the years to come. We would also like to present to you some general comments on the zero draft. We believe that the whole document should at least have its minimum standards, consider the current strategic plan, especially related to the target 18. We should now take steps backwards. This is already a text that has been adopted and negotiated, and that should be part of our base for analysis and discussion. We also think it is important to include and use a human rights based approach and prioritize the protection of nature and the human rights of indigenous peoples and local communities defenders. As you know, lots of brothers and sisters have been killed just by protecting biodiversity, protecting our Mother Earth. Therefore, we believe that that should not happen.
All of our human rights have to be protected, especially when we are the ones who are protecting nature. And that's why we're asking for you to take this focus into account. And we have also presented evidence of all of the contributions that Indigenous peoples have made to biodiversity. And this we can see in biodiversity frameworks and in the local outlooks on local biodiversity outlook. It's also evident there. We also think that it is important for you to consider having consistency between goals and targets, because sometimes that connection isn't there. The language that is used is not necessarily the same. For example, the goal on participation in benefit sharing, it's important to have the links there be very clear. It's also important to have consistency between nature and culture, so that the whole global biodiversity framework can be coherent. The Indigenous peoples are the ones that really manifest this relationship between nature and culture with animals and plants. We also have our languages, and we have knowledge on medicinal plants. If we lose our languages, then we lose our knowledge, the knowledge that we use to be able to manage biodiversity. We have also noticed that some of the goals in the document mention that the benefits for people have to do with using nature, and we want there to be a mutual relationship. It is our responsibility to protect nature, and not just talking about Indigenous peoples. We also want to point out that in this process of participation and also implementation, Indigenous peoples and local communities are specific groups, and we are distinct. There is variety within these groups. We want to support the participation of local communities, and also we want to see this throughout implementation of the entire biodiversity framework. And that's everything that I wanted to mention, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Viviana. That's an excellent summary of what we have been talking about and examining. Allow me now to introduce the second part on these results. We specifically would like to talk about results in terms of conservation. The participants emphasized that we should have legal protection of Indigenous peoples and local communities' territories. This is a fundamental element that has been discussed at each one of the regional dialogues that was held. This idea of territory, this is very important. And this is separate from the notion of land. We have also been talking about a sub-goal for land, water, and territory of Indigenous peoples and local communities as a specific category for conservation under a customary use. And this is an important aspect. International organizations are examining this system. The IUCN has been talking about a new Indigenous specific category. So in Target 2, we're also talking about building conservation measures to at least 30% of the planet, but Indigenous peoples are saying that increasing this percentage of areas could actually go against Indigenous people's rights. Ramiro, we've lost your sound. Apologies. I lost you for a moment. You were just talking about the 30% target. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so the technology sometimes fails us. My apologies. So I was saying that we need to look into this 30% increase. So we have to talk about risks to Indigenous peoples when we talk about this target. So Indigenous peoples are saying that if this 30% is increased, then it could affect their rights. Indigenous peoples' rights need to be recognized, and we especially need to emphasize the idea of consultation. It's very important to analyze this situation. This increase above 30% could help to protect biodiversity, but it could also be an attack on rights. So we need to be careful with this. We also need to keep in mind that customary sustainable use can actually lead sometimes to negative practices. And so we need to make sure that the correct things are recognized. Now, in terms of element 24, we are missing Indigenous practices in this section. So we need to look at the balance between each one of the targets. And something that is very important that should be in the targets is this idea of food sovereignty. In the post-COVID era, within this post-2020 process, we are asking ourselves what is going to happen. How are systems going to be affected, and how have they been affected, and how will this affect biodiversity? So those are some of the comments that people have been bringing up. Now, in terms of traditional knowledge, it's important to point out that the writing of Target 19 is something that we need to look at because the previous Aichi Target 18 has stronger wording. So it has been suggested that we should have a minimum standard and go with the Aichi Target 18. We want traditional knowledge to be addressed in the target because otherwise we would be taking a step backward in terms of recognizing people's rights. Now, in terms of implementing this idea of availability of knowledge for researchers and so on, we have to be careful with this because Indigenous knowledge is not in the public domain, and all access to Indigenous knowledge requires free, prior, and informed consent. We have to look at how Indigenous people's rights are affected here. So in Target 19, we need to address traditional knowledge and education, but it's also essential that we guarantee the right to resources based on the Universal Declaration on Indigenous Peoples' Rights and the Nagoya Protocol. This provides us with a framework for us to move forward in terms of protecting rights. Indigenous peoples and local communities' rights need to be protected also in terms of intellectual property. So, for example, fair benefit sharing. We need to bring these two topics together. And I will reiterate, we need to see continuity with between targets 18 and 19. Now we are talking about science here. Apologies, we have lost Ramiro's sound.
esa ciencia
that Indigenous science must allow us to have these two different levels. We're talking about two different kinds of science. So, first of all, academic science, but then there's also Indigenous science, and it needs to be recognized as well. So, these are sort of the broad strokes in the document, and we are going to have an opportunity to progress on these fronts. These are the broad strokes that Indigenous peoples are suggesting. We have been discussing these issues, and we are going to start now with campaigns with Indigenous peoples, and that will provide all of you with information on the proposals and experience that Indigenous peoples have in a dialogue with delegates and state representatives, focal points at the CBD. We have also engaged in dialogue with a broad coalition of people who are defending nature. And we will be looking at what Indigenous peoples' proposals are in this area and how we can find or build links with other organizations around the CBD. That's everything that we wanted to present for now. And following our presentation on the results, I would like to invite Mr. Hezekiel Benitez Diaz, Chairman of the Subsidiary Body on Scientific, Technical, and Technological Advice, for his comments. Mr. Benitez, you have the floor. Please go ahead. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes, we can. Thank you very much. Ramiro? I'm going to speak in English because I see that there are some comments on the interpretation.
Viviana, and people from CBD Secretariat, and all participants of the second Global Thematic Dialogue for Indigenous peoples and local communities of the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. For these 3 intensive days to put together many days of 18 dialogues of work in different regions and organizations all over the planet in order to contribute to the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework to be adopted at COP15. I'd like to remind SOX's mandate to analyze the monitoring framework for the Post-2020, currently under preparation with indicators and baselines. I am happy to see the living document you are drafting on how to make more effective the participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities in follow-up and implementation of CBD, which are key for a successful outcome. I took notes on Tuesday presentations and today's interventions, highlighting the participatory and human rights-based approach, protected areas and wildlife trade, including legal, customary, sustainable use, capacity building for Indigenous peoples and local communities, especially on Indigenous women and youth, the need for funds to ensure full and effective participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities, provisions to protect and respect human rights defenders and nature defenders, role and contribution of women explicitly acknowledge and highlight, conservation, restoration, and planning of land, water, and territory, food security and sovereignty as essence of our cultures, biocultural protocols, previous informed consent, mutual agreed terms, property rights, humans as part of ecosystems, as many of the concepts that I heard during your dialogues, and going to the monitoring framework that should be based on Aichi targets and beyond, but not backwards over already adopted agreements, to ensure coherence and links between goals and targets, to be evidence-based using information like IPBES assessment, GBF5, local biodiversity outlooks 1 and 2. And the question is how to measure and to enhance efforts with specific indicators, which is the role of substance. Amendments on targets. I saw amendments on target 19 to ensure on traditional knowledge to ensure previous informed consent. On target 20, it's very rich and a lot of suggestions that should be taken in consideration while continue the evolution of the new Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. I'd like to draw your attention on that is already published in the website of CBD document Substat 24.3 on the framework for the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. With the scientific and technical information, as you can see, there is already a draft recommendation, draft decision for the Conference of the Parties. There is an annex with proposed headline indicators. So this is a subset of indicators already there. You can take a look on targets 19 and 20 on the new targets. On traditional knowledge and equitable participation in decision-making and rights for indigenous peoples and local communities. There is also another annex on a technical expert group of indicators, and is pending the addendum document to this one with detailed information on indicators and baseline. With this, I really look forward to see the final report of the second Global Thematic Dialogue and concrete participation of representatives of indigenous peoples and local communities in Substat 24 debates in order to fulfill Substat mandate to revise the post-2020 monitoring framework on biodiversity. Thank you very much and congratulations.
Hermano Ramiro.
Ramiro, are you there? Thank you very much. Mr. Benitez, thank you for your words. Now I would like to invite Charlotta Sorsvik, Chair of the Subsidiary Body on Implementation, so that she can share some comments with us. Ms. Sorkvist, you have the floor.
And thank you very much for inviting me to participate today and be able to listen to your views expressed. As my colleague, the Substat Chair, just expressed, I would like to thank you all for your valuable work. I understood that you have been working in so many different meetings all over the world in order to try to come to common views, and it's very, very valuable for the process. I really would like to thank you for all your work on this. I also have understood that your discussion has not directly been linked to the SBI agenda item. As you know, SBI will work on issues related to resource mobilization, capacity building, and others. But all agenda items in this process are interlinked. And as you know, SBI will also provide guidance to the co-chairs or post-2020 process. They provide guidance in order for them to prepare the next draft of the Global Biodiversity Framework prior to the third meeting in a working group on post-2020. So I would like to take this opportunity to highlight some of the agenda items that relates to the preparation of this work. At its third meeting of SBI, it will discuss 7 agenda items that directly relate to a post-2020 global process. And I would like especially to mention that you do have agenda item 3, a review of progress in implementation of the work, very important. We do agenda item 5 on post-2020 process, agenda item 6 on resource mobilization, and agenda item 7 on capacity building, technical and scientific cooperation, technology transfer, knowledge management, and communication. We also have agenda item 8 on cooperation with other conventions, international organizations and initiatives. And agenda item 9 on transparent planning and implementation. This agenda item I would like to mention especially because it links very much to the discussion you had on the draft monitoring framework. And also agenda item 11 on mainstreaming biodiversity within and across sectors. And of course, we also will have discussion about the Cartagena Protocol biosafety with Post-2020 implementation plan, capacity building action plan, and gender plan of action as well. So as we understand, many of agenda items also relate to what you have been discussing today. And I do hope, I will of course take note of your report on this dialogue, and I hope you will also be able to participate in the SBI discussions. And I thank you once again for the possibility to listen to your views expressed today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and for your words. We're going to be sending those documents. I would like to invite the co-chairs on the working group on the Global Framework on Biodiversity post-2020. Please, Mr. Basile, you have the floor.
Please press the speak button. It should be blue at your end.
Okay, I think you can hear me now. Bonjour à tous, je vais continuer en anglais. First, I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking from Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, and I want to thank them for welcoming me and my family from where I'm speaking from my home today. I want to probably give you remarks along three areas. The first one is a quick reminder of where we are in the process. Then second, how some advice on how you can best factor your input. And then finally, if you allow me, a couple personal ideas that I want to leave with you. So on the process, you heard from Ezekiel and you heard from Charlotta about the links to their specific agenda, and I won't repeat what they said. They are providing us with very important advice, and your participation in that advice is key. So that's that. It is important to understand that we're now in a different part of the negotiation process, one that is driven by very specific mandates that is given to Francis and I by the parties, by the discussion that is taking place at the open-ended working group. And those of you that were at the second meeting in Rome will remember that the mandate we received was to prepare an updated draft based on a very limited set of information. And that started from the discussion that took place in Rome, then the input from the thematic consultation. The next step in the process is to go through the Substar and SBI meeting, and then we will receive that advice, and then we'll create draft 1. So it is very important that you participate in that. And then we hope to have a open-ended working group 3 meeting. At this point in time, it is difficult to give you a specific time, but this meeting, you will have draft 1 6 weeks in advance of that meeting, and that will be the time you have to consult and prepare for the discussion. Then we'll have the discussion, and then we'll prepare a final text, and that text will be available 6 weeks before the COP15. So that gives you a very brief and very rough characterization of the process. Now, the second point is your input. I won't repeat what Ezekiel said about the content of the advice we heard. I heard that too, and there is no need to. I'm associating myself with Ezekiel. The advice I would give you is there is many comments you've made, and I think it may be wise for you to focus on a short number of specific points that are the key priority for your group. So having long documents is useful for Francis and me because we can refer to them and work from them. But in terms of the engagement with parties and participation in the discussion, it may be wise for you to focus on your top 5 priorities and be clear on how you want those accomplished. So that's an advice. You can take it or leave it. It's just that we offer to you. In doing so, you may also want to keep in mind the context of the negotiation. So definitively, we heard very clearly from many parties that they want a simple framework, one that is simpler than the previous one, that is easier to measure and easier to understand. And to that respect, we were asked to reduce the number of targets. While if you've seen the framework, we've not been very successful in reducing. We're about the same number of targets. So it is going to be a challenge to see new targets added to that framework. I'm not saying it's not possible. What I'm saying is that if you're thinking about adding a target, it's also probably important to think about which one are less important and should be withdrawn from that framework. So that's a second context. Finally, on the ID side, there is 2 points I wanted to leave with you. And those are personal reflection from me and hope they are helpful to you, and they're reflection from my perspective where I've been working on some of those issues for many years. The notion of indigenous protected and conserved area. And there is one avenue, which is to try to have a specific category for indigenous protected and conserved area. In some part of the world, there was a different views where indigenous protected and conserved area could be of many kinds, from the strictest protection where there is absolutely no presence of human and no take, all the way down to the area that are managed for biodiversity, but where there is a number of economic activity taking place. So basically, in those cases, there was no specific categories for indigenous protected area, but there was a recognition that the management of those areas can be done by indigenous people and their government, just like they be done by other governments. So that's one idea. The second idea I want to leave with you is this very important dialogue about how do you position traditional knowledge versus the so-called regular science. And I have never found a good word for that. It is a very important subject. And in several countries, there is struggle to make the right place for traditional knowledge. Some have made some progress and some are on the way to better recognize, but I've not seen any country where it's fully included equal in every aspect. What I think is important is to create a frameworks that allow this to take place and allow it to take place within the context of national framework and national recognition. So set the goal, set the direction, but leave the context of each regional and national circumstances to progress, with the clear goal that at the end of the day, we want traditional knowledge to be included in every decision making at the appropriate level and according to appropriate circumstances. So, Mr. Chair, thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope my co-chair Francis Ogwal has been able to.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Basile. We thank you for your words. And now I will give the floor to Mr. Francis so that we can hear his comments. co-chair, Francis, please go ahead.
Please, Francis, if you could press the right hand button, we could find you in the list. Hermano Batsit, parece que perdimos al señor
Sí.
Francis.
I think we lost him. Okay, well, thank you for all your comments to our chairs and co-chairs. Thank you, first of all, for your participation. Probably because of internet issues, Mr. Francis wasn't able to participate, but we will be sending the document. We have proposals for target 12 and 20, which are also important to us. So you will be receiving this document to take them into consideration. I would like to reflect on our position nowadays within this process. For many of us, the health crisis has really set up the analysis of our objectives and goals. Indigenous peoples and local communities have been strongly affected by COVID-19, but we really reassure our position of protecting nature. Our relationship with nature is spiritual in a daily basis. We believe that the global framework is key, and we also believe that our input should be included since they're very important. Our work within this 3-day dialogue is collection of all the different ideas on the protection of forests, rivers, lands, and the protection of all the community members. I would like to thank all the organizers and our co-chair Lucy for this great work along these 3 days. We have contributed, we have discussed, we have talked. I want to thank for your great work. Thank you very much for all your different contributions. It has been a hard work. Thanks to our rapporteurs. I would like to also thank for the participation of the chair of SAFSTA, the co-chair of the SBA, and also the co-chairs of the working group on the Global Biodiversity Network Post-2020. We hope that our thoughts and ideas take into account. I will also thank the interpreters because without them we weren't really able to communicate. Thank you for your participation, if you and also the secretariat, and an open space to especially greet and thank John. John will no longer work next year, and he has been playing a key role in the negotiation and in the participation of IPLCs within the convention. John started working in the high-level commission of human rights. He was part of the permanent secretariat, and he got up to the secretary of the CBD, and he has been working hand in hand with the IPLCs. The convention is one of the best practices, especially because of its good relationship with the IPLCs. And I would like to invite the regional coordinators of the Indigenous Forum to take the floor. I would like to ask them 1 or 2 minutes because of the time to just send a brief note to John. I would like first of all invite Lucy Molingay, our co-chair, to speak. I will give you the floor, Lucy.
Lucy, could you please press this? She's hermano.
Vamos.
Perdimos a...
I think we also lose. We just lost Lucy. Now we can give the floor to Labba from Asia. Labba, Lapak.
Please press the speak button. Yes.
Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity to share something from Asia. Through Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, I had
We lost Lakpa. Please press the speak button. Mr. Lakpa.
Can you hear
Yes.
me?
We can hear you
Okay.
now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Co-Chair, again. Through Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, I had the opportunity to work in partnership with the CBD Secretariat, particularly John Scott, since 2012, particularly in building the capacity of the representatives of indigenous peoples and government by organizing trainings at the regional level. So we used to do it like once in 2 years. We not only limited our engagement at the regional level, but also tried to support the plan of indigenous peoples that came out from the regional trainings. So we really thank John for his partnership and guidance in terms of building the capacity of indigenous peoples in the region. Even though AIPP has been engaging in the convention for almost 2 decades, I had started engaging in the convention through International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity only since 2018. Even in this short period of time of engagement in the international level, I came to know that John has been the biggest supporter and the closest friend of indigenous peoples and local communities, and a very strong breeze between the IAFB and the convention. So John, thank you very much for your leadership. Thank you very much for your commitment in really making indigenous voices more visible in the convention. You retiring from the secretariat means a huge loss, not only for the IAFB, but also for the convention. Whatever your future plan is, I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Gracias, Lapa. Le vamos a dar el espacio a Gumbrit. Tienes
Umbrit, you have now the floor.
Yes, please press this. Yes.
Yeah, I wasn't exactly aware that I was going to speak, but I was called upon, so I just also take this opportunity from the Arctic region to. Now I'm hearing myself in an echo. Anyway, I started with the Convention on Biological Diversity in 2006, and it was a great honor to see that the Secretariat was well represented in our caucuses and very openly and friendly way of guiding our work or informing our work to help us perform better as an Indigenous caucus in the convention negotiations. And this has been the experience for the Arctic region representatives all through John's career. So this is just to say thanks a lot for the great support always, and being a good friend as well from the Arctic region. And also all the best for in your future plans. Thank you.
Gracias, Gumbrit. Le vamos a dar la palabra.
Thank you. Gunbrit, we are now going to give the floor to Paulina. Paulina, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for giving the floor. I would like to speak on behalf of Russia, Eastern Europe, and Caucasus. I would like to thank John sincerely for all the years he devoted to indigenous peoples, for his support, advice, and consultancy on different aspects among the Secretariat of GBF, and on different platforms within UN. I would like to thank you for your wisdom, for your productivity, for your positive attitude, for your constant positive humor, and you basically passed on your positiveness and your inspiration into our work. I cannot imagine our future work without John, because I've been participating for many years as a coordinator on behalf of Russia, and I have always worked with John, closely worked with John. I'd like to say that John is a representative himself of indigenous peoples, and it is important that within the Secretariat, the person who's responsible for indigenous peoples is a holder of traditional knowledge. John has always taken part in all the Caucasus meetings. He has always guided us. And at the same time, he is an integral, honest, and sincere person. We have a word in Russia: when you retire, your life just starts, because you have new opportunities, and new opportunities actually open up. So I would like to wish John to stay proactive, funny, and optimistic person, and enjoy your well-deserved retirement and rest. Now I would like actually to give you a hug, to give you a small gift, retirement gift. And I would like to wish all of us, and to wish John, good positive attitude every day. Maybe traveling, we will welcome you wholeheartedly here in Russia. We would like to welcome you here, and I look forward to it, and I hope that John will never forget about us. And I would like also to remind you, I don't know whether you can see or not, in the past, indigenous peoples, I'm sorry for my webcam, they were ILC, Indigenous Local Communities. And now we should not forget, we are IPLCs, Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities. These are two pages. This is our starting points when we were just indigenous peoples and separate local communities. And this is where we are now. And this is John's achievement. Thank you, John, for your work. You are an excellent person. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Gracias.
Thank you, Paulina. We are very grateful for your words and what you have just expressed. We would now like to ask Tonio to take the floor. Tonio Sadik, go ahead.
Hello, friends and colleagues, and particularly good friend John Scott. I just want to acknowledge all of the work that you have done. John, known you maybe for 5 or 6 years. Clearly from the photos, you've been around a lot longer with the CBD, and it's always great to see these photos. And I know many of you on our call today have perhaps known John much longer. But the one thing that makes it a little bit different in my context is that I'm just a couple of 100 kilometers from Montreal, where John spends most of his time while with the CBD, and so he has been a great ally to help me to become more familiar with the issues and to support the work that we've been doing on behalf of First Nations and other Indigenous peoples in Canada. So just want to acknowledge that, John, and say thank you very much. Miigwech.
Lucy, no sé si
I'm not sure if Lucy is back, but we will give the floor to Lucy now and try again.
Thank you very much, Ramiro, and thank you, co-chair, for all the work that we've done today and also for the others. Sorry, today was not the best day for me or with the internet. Talking about John as a brother from another continent, I don't even know what to say when I hear you're going to retire and not going to be with us in the work that we do. I know we'll be missing you a lot. And we've come a long way. Personally, we've known each other since you're in the human rights up to the permanent forum and the CBD. I can't even tell how many years that are. And for us, you're always special in Africa. You've helped us move forward. You have mentored many of us, and you have also helped our region to really come up with the different meetings that we've had, always encouraging us. And also at the CBD level, it's really great that we've been working together. It's been a very good relationship working with all of us, the new, the old, and all of us who are the same level. We cannot say much, but we just say thank you, and we will be still working and talking to you, and we look forward and really wish you all the best, and especially now that we are in December. This is a festive season for some time, but we don't know how it will be now with the coronavirus and COVID-19, but we do wish you all the best. Merry Christmas in case you don't talk to us again in this time. And we remember you are always with us, and we'll always be with you and working, and remember the good work that you've done in CBD and with all of us. Thank you very much, John. We will be missing you in CBD. Thank you.
Gracias,
Ramiro.
Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you to my co-chair. Indigenous peoples from Latin America would also like to thank John. As all past coordinators have said, John has done a tireless work. It has not been easy, but it has also been fun work that has brought us a lot of joy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Lucy. Ramiro is leading.
Sí.
Hermano Ramiro?
Sí.
Ramiro? Yes, can you hear me? Yes, we hear you. Okay, thank you. I wanted to say as well that Indigenous peoples from Latin America would also like to thank John for all of his work. We know that all of the work that he has done has not been easy, but it has been joyful work, and we have all been able to share in the fruits of our labor. I would like to also point out that there are two very important directives that were a direct result of John's work. John is someone who has devoted his entire life to the work of Indigenous people, and we know that other people will follow suit, and we will continue to see the fruits of our labor. Thank you also to Viviana, because it is thanks to everyone here that we are able to see the participation of Indigenous peoples. And now I would like to open the floor to John to say a few words. Go ahead, John.
Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Firstly, greetings from Mohawk territory. You know, I'm based in Montreal and on the lands of the Ganagawagi people, so I want to acknowledge their elders, past, present, and future. I never intended to say goodbye, so I'm wondering where to start. I'm deeply moved by your words, by your thoughts. I could not have done the last 20 or 30 years with many of you by my side. We've always been together in a good fight. So it has been the greatest privilege and greatest honor of my life to be with Indigenous peoples in the good fight. And it has always been my aim to build a tapestry of protection around traditional knowledge and our lifestyles. And I hope to a degree we've accelerated this work. So many of you I've known for 20 or 30 years, since the Working Group on Indigenous Populations, the Working Group on the Draft Declaration, the Permanent Forum, and of course the CBD for the last 15 years. So my intention is not to say goodbye and not to talk too long, because I don't intend to say goodbye. You're my brothers and sisters, you're my family, and after a good rest, I do hope I'll be back contributing to your work in the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. Forgive me this week, I want to assure you I don't have COVID, I simply have some very bad back problems that I'm trying to fix, and I was very lucky that I have such a talented team that could step in and help me. But just briefly, I was thinking a 15-year-old John Scott first went to a protest for native title in Brisbane. I won't tell you how long ago that was. And I saw police brutality against Aboriginal people. And it changed my life because I thought the system was set up to protect everybody. Then I realized the system was working the way it was intended to work, and that was to exclude Indigenous peoples and to suppress Indigenous peoples and our rights. So as a 15-year-old, I continued to grow, and when I finally made it to human rights in Geneva, I was lucky to meet somebody like Mrs. Erica Irene Dias, who of course was the chair of the working group on the draft declaration. She looked after me, she treated me as a son or a nephew, and she made a real difference. I remember she was telling me that when Crete, her island, was invaded by the Nazis, they were liberated a few years later by brown-skinned people who were from Australia and New Zealand. And she asked her mother, who are these people, these allies who are saving us? And her mother said, these are native people from Australia and New Zealand. And Mrs. Dias made a decision then, as a young girl, to devote the rest of her life to paying us back for what we did for her. And she completely changed my life. That and joining the Indigenous caucus, I found I had brothers and sisters all over the world who were in the same struggle. And we're continuing to be in that struggle. And of course, we must be evident in the Global Biodiversity Framework. I just want to finish by saying the Secretary General of the United Nations announced today that humanity was in a suicidal war against nature. Indigenous peoples are allies of nature, and we must challenge the mainstream to join us. They cannot survive fighting nature, fighting Indigenous peoples. It's suicidal. And I think that is the lesson that Indigenous peoples have. We are the hope of humanity. We remain optimistic. We continue to have large families and lots of kids because we love them. I see people coming through like Capac, Indigenous peoples now with doctorates of law, and I'm confident in the 30 years that I've been participating internationally, there are people to fill my steps and even make them bigger. But I will always be there in the background to support Indigenous peoples to ensure that we have access to all of our human rights. So I'm going to stop talking now, and I assure you that after a good rest, I'll be back as part of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, and I will support you until my very last breath. Thank you so much.
Gracias, John.
Thank you, John. we thank you so much for all of your work and dedication, and the IIFB is your home. The doors are always open for you to join us. Now, as is traditional among Indigenous people, we are going to close the session with a spiritual closing. So we would like to ask Tata Felix to do the closing that he always does. Go ahead, Tata. Hello, and thank you everyone for giving me this space so that we can communicate with our ancestors. This is part of our Indigenous protocols. It's important to always make space for this activity. Now, today in the Mayan calendar, it is day 9, and 9 is the net, like a fishing net. But what does this fishing net represent? Each knot between the threads is a point of convergence. But in this particular case, convergence of energy and convergence of ideas and words. A convergence point of our hearts. It is a point of convergence of our spiritual beings. And in this case, it's the spiritual being of each one of you that participated in this meeting today. So you have shared everything that you have done, your actions and your emotions, you've put them out on the table. And we are going to close today before our ancestors with this idea so that we can continue on our path and continue defending our ideas. We are going to continue taking this immense knowledge from our ancestors and use it. This is not just any kind of knowledge, it is science. Believe me that the Mayan spiritual guide, when this guide works and communicates with the ancestors, there is math behind this. This all translates into numbers and calculations. Each single one of these different points is translated into a number, and those numbers need to come together just in the way that energy flows, and that's how we come to a conclusion. So it is a mathematical operation that we do, and those numbers give us the diagnosis or the prognosis that will be our guide. So spirits, movement, air, cloud, the light, all of these things are analyzed and we pull a conclusion out of it. So it is a true science. All of our knowledge is science. So that is what the prayer is about today. We want to thank the Mayan god Cat for all of these ideas. And let's allow these points of convergence for ideas, allow us to reap the rewards of the work that we have done together. So before our ancestors and all of the authorities that are here with us today, let us thank the spirits and ancestors.
Sabi lo kala kahau sa koli bito la hawalom mahau kahulom mahau tepeu kahau kumas balam kitse balam ka mahau kaf ikbalam kaha paluna chumija chumija ka kichaha. Vamos a agradecer.
We are now going to thank the grandfather cat and all grandfathers that have allowed us to bring this cycle of dialogue to a close. Brothers and sisters from different parts of the world, thank you. You have given us this forum. Thank you for allowing us to communicate through sacred air, Thank you for listening to us, for being there for us, for understanding us. Please, therefore, the Indigenous peoples are the children of Mother Earth, and our actions, our ways of thinking and our ways of acting, all of these things that our brothers and sisters in every corner of the world do in order to preserve and protect the planet.
خلينا ما تيجي ركوش لب ركوش تاو ركوش كاك.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Tata. We're very grateful. On behalf of my co-chair and everyone who made this dialogue possible, I would like to thank everyone for their participation, and I wish you all and your communities, your peoples, your families, a wonderful end of year. An end of year where we are all well and we can all bring things to a close. And I will now thank you once again. With the permission of our ancestors, we will now bring this to a close. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, co-chairs. Thank you, everyone.